Hey everyone, so we're going to kind of switch gears. If you already did the long division Google Doc, we're switching over to trig. Before we go super into trig, I want to show you guys how to convert from degrees to radians. What those are, basically they're different ways to measure angles. So we can measure angles in degrees, so we know that as if we were to say like this is 50 degrees or something like that. Radians is another way to measure angles, but instead of using degrees, they have some form of pi in there. So we could say something is like 3 pi over 4 radians. These are just examples of what these are. So how you go from one to the other, how you go from degrees to radians, is we're going to multiply the degree by pi over 180. So let's take a look at this first example. So if we want to take 30 degrees and make it a radian, I'm going to multiply times pi over 180. And then I'm going to actually show you two different ways we can multiply here. We're going to multiply straight across. So 30 times pi is just 30 pi. Over, this is like over an invisible 1 here. So we have 1 times 180, which is just 180. And then we have to reduce it. So right away I see that these can both be divided by 10, divided by 10. 30 divided by 10 is 3. I keep the pi. 180 divided by 10 is 18. This can be reduced even further by dividing by 3. 3 divided by 3 is just 1. Keep the pi. 18 divided by 3 is 6. So 1 pi over 6, or you could just write pi over 6 and drop that 1. So 30 degrees as a radian would be pi over 6, or 1 pi over 6. I said I was going to show you two ways to multiply it. Go ahead and get this down. If you need to pause it, go ahead because I'm about to erase it. So another way you can multiply and kind of save yourself some steps on reducing is when you're at this step, you can look diagonally and say, can I just reduce here? So looking at 30 and 180, I'm like, oh, okay, both of those I can just divide by 10 right away. So 30 divided by 10 becomes 3. 180 divided by 10 becomes 18. And then now I'm going to multiply straight across. 3 times pi becomes 3 pi. 1 times 18 becomes 18. And then this still does have to be reduced by 3 pi over 6. So it just saves you some steps on reducing. You could reduce like earlier if you want. Okay, let's go ahead and try the next one. So 150, if we want to make that a radian, we're going to multiply by pi over 180 times pi over 180. So go ahead and take a second, think about what this is going to do. What does that 150 mean? Don't forget there's a little invisible 1. You multiply straight across. 150 degrees times pi just becomes 150 pi. Over 1 times 180 just becomes 180, and then we're going to start reducing. Right away I see divide by 10. And then the 10s, it always can divide by 10 if you have a 0 at the end. It's basically crossing out that 0. So this then becomes, down here, 15 pi over 18. It can be reduced by 3 again, so divide by 3, divide by 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5 pi. 18 divided by 3 is, is 6. So we have 5 pi over 6 is the radian form of 150 degrees. Okay, go ahead and try 270 on your own. So you have 270, you're going to multiply it times 1 pi over 180, and then you're going to reduce it. Make sure you go ahead and type your answers onto the Google Doc. You don't have to take a picture of your work, just the answers is fine. You can use, for the fractions, use the slash key. So if I were to enter this in, this would be 5 pi over 6, like that. And then I even provided a little pi for you on the Google slide, so you can like copy it from there. So if you see there's like a pi, just highlight it and copy it, and you can use that. If you don't know how to get pi, you can also go to your symbols, insert symbols on Google slide, or if you really don't want to do that, you could just write pi. That's fine with me, 5 pi over 6. That's not the end of the world. Okay, go ahead and do number 3. Make sure 1 through 3 are answered on this slide, and then go on to the next slide, please.